Here we are again, Dan.
It's another day.
It's another day. It's another episode. Our last episode, I was thinking, how are we going to top that one?
I know.
Because that one's been our record breaker so far.
It has.
We are at close to 1,300 views on that, which is nothing for Taylor Marshall, Kennedy Hall. But for this small, humble little podcast, that's a big deal, isn't it, Dan?
It's a big deal. We feel like big deals.
We've been celebrating every day, right?
Right.
As the views go up higher and higher. But the good news is, I thought, how are we going to top that? The way you top that is you bring some great guests onto the show.
Absolutely.
And today we have a really great one. We've got the great one.
The great one.
Dr. Edward Schaefer from the Collegium College, right?
Yes.
Which is not a Catholic college in title, in name. But in spirit,
we're not legally affiliated with the Catholic Church.
Correct. But in actual practice, it's a heck of a lot more Catholic than majority of what's out there, is it not?
Right. We started it for that purpose.
Yes, that's fantastic. So I think it's worthwhile to say we try to keep these podcasts very laid back, but welcome to our podcast, Dr.
Thank
Schaefer.
you. It's really good to be here.
And it's nice that he's come in right after we were talking a lot about our little school over here. So good conversation, probably some things that we can, share, go back and forth on. And then you're doing some exciting work as well that we're thrilled to hear more about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I think you and I particularly have a lot to share, and not just experiences, but strategies and how to get through this troubling times.
Yes. And so that everybody that's listening knows, we have a Securing Sacred Ground fundraising gala tomorrow.
Correct. I was just going to mention there's a reason why this kind man is here.
Yes.
He wasn't just floating through San Antonio, right?
Like, I'm going to go hang out there at Sanctus
Correct.
Ranch. Everybody loves that.
You went out of your way to invite him.
Yes.
Right? And so, so we are right before a big important event here this weekend, and you're going to be a speaker.
I am.
Right? You're one of our guest speakers.
Do you want to give a little tease to what you might be talking about tomorrow?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about why our young people need tradition, or maybe put another way, why somebody like Dan would sacrifice everything he's got and put his home up and start a school for young people based on tradition.
Yeah.
And
I think it's an important topic. Yes. And I think it's one of those topics that it's interesting. There's a lot of young people that are finding tradition. I think you know this, but we came to tradition because of the young people in my family. So it's actually my son, Matthias, when he was about 15, said, "Dad, I think we need to go check this out." And I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. But that's how our journey began. So sometimes it's the young ones that are bringing the old dogs to tradition as well. So
very, very true. Let's start with this, Dr. Schaefer, if you don't mind. Can we go back into time just a little bit? We'll get on our DeLorean and we will go back. Can you give us a little bit of your intro story to how the Collegium was started?
Oh, sure. I was on the faculty of a Jesuit university. I was there for 20 years. Never thought I'd leave. Really liked the work. I was the choir director at the university. Loved where we lived, raised our kids there. Like I said, I never thought we'd leave. And the longer I was there, they just were falling off. The wheels were falling off. And eventually it became something of a faith crisis. I couldn't do it anymore. I don't know what I was going to do, but I had to leave. And it was in that process, looking for a job in another Catholic institution, that I learned the problem wasn't unique to my university. It was system-wide.
yes,
Everything was falling apart. Long story short, I ended up at the University of Florida. I had never stepped foot in a public institution. I had no idea why I was there. And I kind of fought it spiritually for a while. I said, "God, why did you put me here? What's going on?" I came later to realize that was kind of my time in the desert. That was my time to prepare for what he was eventually going to ask me to do. And there are brilliant people at that university, just brilliant people. And I learned a lot about upper level management being in that institution. So I'm very grateful for the time. And at one point we were sitting around the dinner table, my wife and I, the kids are all gone, and we were engaging in one of our normal conversations that, about the Catholic Church, education in the Catholic Church disintegrating. And
We've never had those conversations.
Yeah, and I said, half jokingly, I said, maybe we should start a school. And it got kind of quiet. And then my wife said, I think that's a good idea. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, that was not Karen speaking. She had a great life in Florida. She had a piano studio that had the best students she'd ever taught in her life. These were all students of university people, so they were all kind of high-power, driven people. All of the students were at least bilingual. Some of them were trilingual.
Wow.
They were workers. They were just fine musicians. She was doing the most creative teaching she'd ever done in her life. And she said, yeah, let's do this. I think so. That was God speaking through her. That was clear to me at that point.
And that was about what year?
2014.
2014. Okay, so just a little over a decade.
Yeah.
Wow.
We were established as a nonprofit in 2015, and it's just been a joyride ever since.
Wow. And so your school is located where?
We will be in Kansas City, Missouri this fall.
Kansas City, Missouri. And previously it was also in Kansas City?
No, we were in Western Maryland. We thought we were going to be in Florida, and ran into some logistical issues, but we had a really, really hostile bishop. And so we couldn't get it off the ground.
What's that like?
I don't know. Sometimes I've heard these guys. It's interesting. Yeah, it must be very difficult to work with them.
So
Sorry.
we ended up in Western Maryland. I went to high school there, and I went back to a high school reunion, and one of my classmates is a town leader now, and my wife and I were walking the streets, could make a little vacation of it, and the streets looked just like they did when I was there in high school. Nothing had changed. And so I went to him and I said, Blackie, what would you think about a college to help with economic development? Well, I didn't know that was one of their strategic goals in their economic development plan, education. Okay. They already had 2 educational institutions downtown. And so we fit into that plan very well. And so we ended up in Maryland, and it wasn't perfect, but it was a good situation. We had a very welcoming, supportive bishop. The local pastor was just a jewel. We had a great relationship with the parish. We provided them with music, servers, people teaching in their adult ed program. Students volunteering in the parish school. I mean, the pastor was just great to us. I mean, it was a really nice relationship.
Yeah.
And then Traditionalist came along, and everything turned on a dime.
Wow.
All the masses in the state were canceled, but one. And the pastor was replaced with someone who was assigned to get rid of the Latin Mass. So I never blamed him for it. I have said that I think he undertook the job with a little more zeal than was necessary. but it wasn't. I mean, he was just following orders.
Sure.
So we began a search, and we decided that we weren't going to deal with diocesan parishes staffed by diocesan priests anymore. We had to be somewhere near a traditional religious order that would at least give us the illusion of a little more security. We started with 65 sites, visited 9 cities, and we ended up in Kansas City.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, when you initially launched in Maryland, I've had somewhat of a bird's eye view here with Dan getting his Lumen Christi school going, and it's been no easy task, to say the least. How does one go about starting and building a very unique college like the one that you had that serves, I mean, let's be honest, a pretty niche category?
Yeah, we're
right?
a boutique school.
Very much.
I think it's like that.
Yes. Yeah, we'll add that to the marketing.
Yeah, so can we steal that? That'd be great. A nice boutique.
Yeah, exactly.
Boutique school. That'd be great.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you find people? How do you spread the word about something like that? Did it take a little while before you got a few people enrolled?
Yes, we'll be in Kansas City with 12 people.
Okay.
And I think things will now begin to grow at a little more quicker rate. But it took us a while. And what's clear to us is that, first of all of our students are homeschooled. They come from homeschool.
Yeah, that was very interesting. You mentioned that the other day.
We do not advertise in diocesan schools. That has turned out to be a waste of time and money. They're not interested in what we have to offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a group of private independent schools. Lumen Christi would be an example of one of those. Some of the Chesterton academies, those, and then some of the homeschool hybrid programs. Those seem to be fertile ground. The schools are a mixed bag.
Sure.
But that seems to be okay. And then traditional parishes, particularly if we can connect with the homeschool co-ops in those parishes. That seems to be where we're able to get the word out the best.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've been very content and very comfortable with not necessarily having enormous numbers the last decade or so. You were more so focused on, we want the right fit.
Well, it took us, we didn't actually open until 2021.
Okay,
All
I
right,
see.
So we've just finished 4 years.
Gotcha.
We would be twice the size, but the cancellation of the mass and then the move really hit us hard.
Sure.
We probably would have had more than double the students we have now.
I see. And what?
At some point, I think we'll get to about 100, and I think that's a good number for us.
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds great. Now, what was it about the area that you moved to that you decided this is where we need to settle?
Well, we needed, the number one criteria was we needed a church that was attached to a traditional religious order.
Okay.
That was number one.
Yeah.
And within walking distance of that church, we had to be able to find facilities for classes, for housing, for dining, and that all had to be within walking distance of that church. And they had to be reasonably affordable. Since the COVID and the inflation thing, nothing's affordable now.
Right.
But that was the main criteria.
Okay.
And Kansas City fit that better than any place else we visited.
You found exactly what you were looking for.
I think so. Well,
We shall see, I guess.
yeah.
And if somebody's listening right now and they're like, boy, that sounds like some place that I'd like to look into, can you tell them where they could go find more information? What's the website?
It's the-collegium.org.
Awesome. And I think that, there's a lot of folks that are looking for something, but very often we don't even know we're looking.
Yeah.
We don't know that it exists.
Correct.
So hopefully this will bring some awareness as well for the folks that are listening to what we're doing. And, hopefully some folks will see what you're doing that I think is exceptional. It's what the world needs. We need to bring that traditional faith back into alignment.
Yeah, we could, not today, but another podcast, we could talk about, I think we're turning the entire model of higher education on its head, spiritually, academically, and even financially. So, and it needs to be done. Somebody needs to do it. And I think we've hit the model. It's going to take a little bit of help and time to flesh it out.
Yeah.
But it will be like nothing that exists anywhere else. And we're very excited about that. And I don't think we could do it without divine providence. And God's been with us. He doesn't work on my time climb very well. We have a hard time syncing our watches.
Right. We were talking about that the other day.
But he's been good to us.
That's
Isn't
good.
it interesting?
And one of the things that we were talking about as we kind of got ready, as I picked you up from the airport the other day, we were talking a little bit about a new project that you have going too that I think our listeners would be really interested in some of the information on.
Yeah, so I'm in the early stages. I'm about a third of the way through writing a book. And my working title for this book is The Traditional Movement Dead? And this comes from some observations I've made over the last few years and a survey that I just completed a few months ago. the observations were this, that a huge swath of people who come to the traditional Latin Mass today come from the Novus Ordo. You have to be over 70
Right.
to have experienced the Mass before the council, or you have to be 15 or 16 years old and having maybe been raised under Benedict, unless you in the Society of Pius X or something like that. But,
Sure.
But the big swath of churches, you know, that have the TLM, that's grew exponentially after 2007. So there's a huge swath of people that come to the TLM, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s, who have come from the Novus Ordo.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the questions in my mind is, what brought them here? We speculate a lot, but there's really no real data on why do they come?
Yeah.
And the second thing, and this was even more important to me, was that what I noticed is that all of these people have a familiarity and therefore a level of comfort with the Novus Ordo, because that's where they came from.
Right.
They were raised that way. Okay. Yeah. And as a result, they go back and forth. I call them floaters. Right? I don't mean that derogatorily.
No.
That's just a description of their behavior. and that really puzzled me.
Right.
If you discover this Mass and it appeals to you for whatever reason enough to come, why do you go back?
Right.
So I put a survey out, and I got over 500 responses. And so I got a pretty good data set. Mm-hmm. And I found that the largest single reason that people are attracted to the TLM has to do with aesthetics. It's the beauty of the Mass.
Sure.
It's not a theological decision. By and large, the biggest swath of people that come because they find it beautiful.
Right.
Now, that's a good thing, because beauty is sort of the gateway to goodness and truth, right? So thank God for that. Then I focused on the people that go to both Masses. Mm-hmm. And why do you go? And the people that attend the TLM and also attend the Novus Ordo, by and large, the biggest reason that they attend the Novus Ordo would fall under the umbrella of convenience.
Right. Makes sense.
Right? I got 4 kids in diapers. It's 2 hours away from the TLM, and it takes me 2 hours to get them ready to go to Mass. We drive in the car for 2 hours. Mass is 2 hours, and then we got to go 2 hours home. Everybody's scratching their eyes out, and St. Vincent's is across the street. It's tolerable. We go there, 3 times a week.
Marco and his family have never said that. Yeah. Never said
By
that.
the way,
all.
you forgot to mention, Dr. Schaefer, the vomiting in the car that was on the way. And as soon as we got to Pipe Creek, Texas, it came out. So, yeah. No,
I do have to tell you, I got to tell you one story, though. When we were in Florida, there was a family that drove. They had 5 kids under 7.
Okay. Real Catholics.
They drove 2.5 hours each way to come to Mass. And they were great strategists, all right? They tanked up the kids with snacks and all this kind of stuff, and they played car games on the way. It was a big family outing. And they went to Mass, and then after Mass, they had a big family picnic, and the kids played for a couple hours. I mean, they just made Sunday a really big family day.
Yep.
And so then they put them in their PJs, and they went home, and they crashed on the way home. And the kids loved coming. They were just brilliant.
Yeah.
But they made that sacrifice, and it was 5 hours on the road and a couple hours in Mass and a couple hours at a picnic. It was a full day for them.
Sure.
And I was always in great admiration of their strategy and their willingness to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But many people can't.
Right.
Right. I'm not necessarily critical of people. I have some concerns about it, but I'm not criticizing people for the decisions they make. It's just what I observed, and this is
right.
And the data kind of fills that out. what's behind that data, however, is a thought that the Mass is the Mass is the Mass. Mm-hmm. Right? Wherever I go to Mass, it fulfills my obligation. And so whether I like it or not doesn't matter. It checks the box, takes care of business, and we're okay.
Sure.
Yep.
And they don't really see a difference other than aesthetics between the two Masses.
Right.
And I think that's a huge challenge for the traditional movement. I can give you an example. When the Masses were canceled in Maryland, about a fourth of the parish was attending the Sunday TLM, about 150 people. And when the Mass was canceled, a few families, there was nothing nearby, but there were 3 Masses within an hour away. They were in other states. We were near the state line.
Okay.
There were 3 Masses in other states, and a fourth, if you would be willing to go, an hour and a half. Mass attendance didn't change.
Mm-hmm. I'm shocked by that. We've talked a little bit.
A few people left, but by and large, Mass attendance didn't change. Most of the people made the decision, said, this is my parish, my family's been here for a couple of generations, my friends are here. I'm just going to hold my nose and do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been very challenging because, for me personally, I don't think I could do it. That would not be the decision that I could make at all. We've made that shift, and the shift is over. But we meet many people that haven't, and then there's this different thought process. So as you went further into the data, what else did it tell you?
Well, actually, let me jump to some of my conclusions about this, or thoughts.
Let's jump to conclusions.
Yeah, so I'm really good at that. So, one of the things that I think people don't understand, and I'm actually going to give Francis credit for this. Francis was the first post-conciliar pope that was willing to say there is no hermeneutic of continuity, that the old Mass and the new Mass are theologically incompatible. And that's why he wanted to get rid of the old Mass. All right. So we are one church, but we've got 2 religions. And so I don't think people fully understand that.
Right.
And it's more than an academic discussion, because if you look at other data, it's very clear that young people in particular, the young people who attend Mass, it's somewhere between 7 and 17%. So somewhere between 83 and 93% of our young people we've lost.
Yes.
At any Mass.
At any Mass. However, if you filter that data and focus just on the young people, 18 to 32, that age range, college and shortly after,
Right.
who attend the TLM, the regular Mass attendance is 98%. And I'll talk at length about this tomorrow night. But so this isn't just a matter of aesthetics. It's not just a matter of, checking a box. Are you going to stay connected to the church where you get the sacramental grace that you need to go to heaven? Mm-hmm. Are you going to do what you need to do so that your children have a fighting chance of staying close to the church? And the 2 Masses have very different results. So that it's not just in a matter of aesthetics, it's something far deeper. And so I'm a little concerned about this movement in the sense that it's clear the persecution's not over.
Right.
I mean, look at Charlotte, Detroit, just this week, right?
Right.
The persecution is not over. Do we have the intestinal fortitude to make the sacrifices we need to maintain the tradition for the sake of our souls?
Right.
Do we have that strength? And the data is making me a little nervous that maybe we don't. And if you look at all of the discussions about the reforms following the council, no one ever talks about whether people need to like it or not. They just want people to accept it.
Right.
They don't care whether you like it. Right? And so, bishops can come crashing down on the Mass and cancel it everywhere, and doesn't seem to make a big difference. People kind of grouse a little bit, but that goes away eventually,
Right.
And they just kind of hold their nose, and they'll go back to the way it was before. And so now, do I think the TLM is going to die? No, I don't really. I mean, it can't. It's the apostolic liturgy. It's the Mass that Christ gave us. It's not going to die.
Yeah.
But I'm a little nervous about the strength of the movement. What would it have been like if in Western Maryland, if 25% of the parish disappeared?
Right.
Right. The results might have been a little different.
Well, and I wonder too, being newer into tradition and not having all of those experiences, I wonder if people like me even realize what was saved. There were warriors that had to do lots against the grain, swim upstream, Archbishop Lefebvre, others that have held on to something otherwise I would never know about it. And yet when we have this great pearl of great price, do we protect it? Do we make the sacrifice? We've talked a lot about that. We've noticed that here with what we're doing. A lot of people are like, I think that's great. I think y'all should stay the course, do what you're doing. And I'm like, great. Well, we see you next weekend. Well, there's a soccer game. And, Little League, the god of Little League. So it does happen. So to hear these numbers, it makes me nervous too. And to hear that a parish that had 150 people attending, the TLM just went away, because there is something radically different about the faith when practiced in the traditional Latin Mass. There's no denying that. And so it's shocking. What do you think are practical things for those of us that are on the front lines? Not only just for the salvation of our own souls, for our families, but, we all are part of the Great Commission. We are supposed to go forth, make disciples of all nations. I didn't know that this was there. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it until my son said, hey, Dad, take a look at this. What is it that we should be doing in a practical way to kind of say, no, time out, we're going to hold fast?
Well, the first thing, I think people need to begin to educate themselves. They don't get enough education unless they take it on themselves.
Right.
And there are really a number of good books, and I'm having a Biden moment here. I don't have the title, but there are books on the history, the form, the theology of the Old Mass.
Yeah.
And it's an excellent book. Peter Kwasniewski has a number of books that give a good apology for the Old Mass, and I think people just need to read and dig into this and begin to understand this.
That's right.
In fact, we find that when our students come, these are students who come from traditional families, and they're 18 years old. They've attended the traditional Latin Mass their whole life. They don't really have they come to this Mass because that's what their family goes to.
Right.
Right. It's not much different than, well, I'm a Baptist because my family was Baptist.
Right.
Well, I'm a traditional Catholic because my family's a traditional Catholic. And now they're coming into their adulthood, and they don't really have the ability to articulate why it's important. And this is the time in their life when they'll get challenged.
Yeah.
So we actually have a course that we give our freshmen when they come in immediately, and it's on the history, theology, and form of the Mass. They spend half a semester getting their heads around what's important, why the theology of this Mass is so critical to their life, their spiritual life. And then the other half of the semester we spend in a kind of apologetics about tradition, so that they can begin to articulate that theology and why it's important to them.
I like that.
Yeah, and it's I actually teach that course, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great experience, and it's kind of nice to see the the lights go on. And
Yeah.
students have that experience. So number one is educate yourself. And I think parents should get familiar with the data. Mm-hmm. They should just really understand that the faith life of their children is on the line here.
Well, we've talked about that many times. The data that is everywhere is so shocking that whether you've ever attended a traditional Latin Mass or not, every parent needs to know right now, it's scary what's happening to our children, whether they went to Catholic schools, whether they were, every Sunday Mass goers. The numbers are just horrific. There was another survey that was put out today, and basically 13% of the people that took the survey were actually Catholic in any way, shape, or form. Whether they go to Mass, whether they go to confession once a year, do they pray daily? We've got an epidemic. There's a problem. It is a crisis, and parents, we need to be looking for, give me anything that helps to answer why this is happening. And truly, when you look at the numbers on the traditional Latin Mass side, and also with educating as to the why behind it, there is a solution that could make a radical difference in the results for our children. We, as parents, we have to take that solution. We have to look seriously at it. But unfortunately, I think so many of us, we've talked about it, lamented many, many times, that we're just lazy. Parents are lazy. And we've got to get the faith beyond laziness. I'm looking up at a crucifix. I mean, that wasn't laziness.
When parents, when they baptize their child, they are told in that ceremony that they have an obligation to raise that child in the faith. Mm-hmm. And when they're married, they're asked, will you raise your child in the laws of the church? And they have to say yes. If they don't say yes, they won't get married, right? Nope. And so I think parents have to understand that when their judgment day comes, they're going to have to answer for that. Now, we are going to have to answer that. I include myself in that.
Right.
I understand at some point your children become adults, they make their own decisions. You can't make them do things.
You can't spank them at 30. It's not allowed anymore.
Yeah. But
in my culture, they still throw the shoe though. They do show. They throw the chancla. Yeah, that's right.
It's a huge responsibility. And one of the things I say this as a parent, where I was naive, and I think parents today are generally naive. We don't understand the culture. Mm-hmm. We don't understand the crushing weight of a hedonistic culture that just does not care about your children.
Right.
And so one of the things I think is important to help our kids as they grow find communities that will support them in the faith. And you're going to find that in TLM communities. Right. Those people are committed. I'm not saying Novus Ordo people aren't committed. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying when you look at the data, the traditional communities are committed to practicing the faith and keeping it alive. When you go to Mass, one of the things I always think about that shows me how healthy a parish is the confessions. Mm-hmm. And every time I go to Mass in the TLM parish in Kansas City, and the confession lines are just endless. They're just endless. And it's I think it's a sign of health that, we recognize ourselves as sinners. We need the grace of the sacrament. Yeah. I think that's important for kids to see their parents willing to own up to their own faults and try to live better lives. So that's just one kind of tiny sign that they're really trying to live the faith.
Yep.
So, and then the last thing I would say is, if this is important, you got to make the commitment. Be willing to make whatever sacrifice is necessary. If that means driving 2 hours, then you drive 2 hours. You find a way to make it fun for the kids or whatever, you got to do it. Yep. I mean, we do this with all kinds of other things in our life that we think
do.
is important. And this is the most important thing in our life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
You got to find a community where there's whiskey and cigars after mass. That's what you got to find.
Yeah, I wish that was around.
yeah, and beards.
And beards.
Trad men wear
Trad-
beards.
yes.
I don't know what the deal is, but trad men's are.
Well,
It's because we've kind of put on a few pounds for every child, and so this helps the facial.
someone said it was the push-up bra for men. So, yeah, you know.
Well, I think it's great, and I appreciate you sharing that because we really have to understand, as especially all of us as fathers right here. I mean, it is a war, and if we're gonna suit up for the battle, the salvation of our children's souls and our own, we've got to treat it like we would a war. We've got to be prepared. We've got to do the hard work. Yeah. We've got to go through the basic trainings. We gotta run that hill. We got to carry the packs.
You know, we make that prayer, you know, St. Michael defend us in battle. And those aren't just poetic words. It's true.
Right.
It's a battle for our souls.
Yep.
And dads in particular, I'm glad you brought this up. Studies show that when children are very young, it's the mom that nurtures them, right? That's the first stage of life. But when they begin to get old enough to kind of interface with the world, they look to dad for leadership.
That's right.
And if dad is practicing, if dad is providing the spiritual leadership of the home, there's a good chance they'll stay faithful. And if he is not, they're doomed. Statistically, they're doomed. It's not going to happen. So the pressure's on dads for sure.
And as Marco, you talk about all the time, you know, so many of the podcasts that we have, they're kind of forcing, they're channeling towards the guys. So any of the guys that are listening right now, there's another challenge for us to man up.
We're harping on this all the time on this podcast. I mean, that's something that we're big on. We Dan and I say, hey, we accept our role in that, and we invite others to join us. Now, another thing that I will give a quick plug for the RCCI here at Sanctus Ranch, Dan puts on a very manly retreat, a couple of them actually every single year. And so these events also are a big deal because it gives us as men the opportunity to go get away for a weekend. But my concern is that a lot of the other retreats have been very watered down, to put in very nice terms. You know, the typical diocesan retreat, they are typically, you look at the leadership, it's almost always run by a female. Women are amazing creatures, right? But there is a place and there is a time for men to actually lead these things. And so I think it's noticeable. And I think that in particular, the retreats that Dan puts on here, boy, are they edifying for men in particular, for fathers. And so I've gained a lot from coming to these types of retreats. And so to your point earlier, the statistics show when dad is involved and when dad is actually living and not just saying, right? These type of things really help. They really help us in our journey so that we can go back home and we can live our faith to our families and give these kids somewhat of a chance. Because, you know, you mentioned the culture that's just ready to destroy them. We've also talked about, and we had an amazing priest come one time and talk about the lion that's just ready to devour our souls. And guess what? Especially our children's souls.
Yeah, I don't remember the joke, but there's a joke about the devil trying to figure out a strategy to conquer the world. And what he decides to do ultimately is to convince people they have time. They don't have to worry about hell now. Right. And I think that's where we are. I think that you know, people, of course I want to go to heaven. Doesn't everybody want to go to heaven? Right? Of course I want to go to heaven. But I'll worry about that later.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
And what happens is, first of all, you really don't know when the end is going to happen.
That's right.
But even for the average person who lives a normal, long, healthy life, if you're not focused on the goal from the beginning, you're not going to get 3/4 of the way through your life and then all of a sudden change everything. You know, you've got to be in that battle all the time, every day, because if you don't, you're going to get attacked and you're going to get overcome.
Absolutely.
Very well said. Very well said. Dr. Edward Schaefer, this has been a great podcast. Thank you for sharing your backstory of your college and everything that you're doing and your statistics. I didn't know you were such a statistic man, but you've got the data to back it up.
I do.
So
Well, thank you. It's been real. You've made it easy to be here.
Excellent. We'll probably have you on again at some point, and it'll probably be in the next 24 hours.
Yes.
So don't get too comfortable.
I don't know. You might have exhausted everything I have to say.
Well, we'll tease this because when it airs and it goes out on YouTube, this will give people something to look forward to. But we are absolutely gonna have another podcast where it will be basically everyone that's part of this event will be in here, you included, and our other guest, Dr. K. I'm not going to even attempt to slaughter his last name. I've done it too many times, as well as Nick Cavazos, who's been generous with his time here at the ranch for multiple events. So, that is something to really look forward to. There's your teaser right there. I'll look at the camera. There is your teaser on that one. Actually, let's try this again. There's your teaser. I was on the wide shot. But either way, again, you got any parting things for us, Dan?
I'm very excited. I want to say thank you. We're excited for tomorrow night. We'll also tease the fact that we're going to record the talks from tomorrow. They'll be available. And so I think there's some great stuff happening. And for everyone that's listening to the podcast, every time we do one of these podcasts, it's to learn more about what God's calling us to do. And I think you've shared with us a lot of good challenge today. I look forward to the book. I look forward to learning more. And to everybody that watched this podcast, I mean, the battle's real. We got to get about it. And if we're going to restore a Christian culture, that doesn't happen by being lazy. So get out there and work.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. God bless you, our faithful listeners and followers. And that does it for another podcast, Restoring Christian Culture. Thanks again, Doctor. We
Thank you
appreciate
for having me. It's been great.
Absolutely. We'll catch you on the next one.